Hello, and a very big welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ziki, and I'm the Executive Director of the Brand and Community team here at SGInnovate. And for those of you who might not be familiar with us, we are a homegrown deep tech talent, venture, and community builder backed by the Singapore government. We believe that the world has many pressing issues, and deep tech can play a big role in addressing these issues. Our mission is to help entrepreneurial scientists discover and launch impactful deep tech solutions from Singapore for the world. Many of these solutions hold tremendous potential to solve challenging issues and improve lives, environments, and economies in many areas from food to healthcare, just to name a few. So we do this in three main ways. We are an early stage investor, primarily looking at funding emerging technologies, particularly those heavily rooted in research, requiring specific capabilities and a high degree of specialization. We're also big investors in talent and development programs to build and groom deep tech talent to support Singapore's thriving deep tech economy. Our efforts to support talent go at all levels from a wide range of backgrounds and serve as a gateway to a career in deep tech. And to support this growing ecosystem, we've built a community of close to 70,000 founders, researchers, corporates, and folks from across the deep tech ecosystem within our network, both locally and internationally. So we are Singapore's fastest growing deep tech community, and we host events such as this to discuss important topics and which serve as a platform for knowledge sharing, networking, and creating opportunities for collaboration. Deep Tech for Good is an area we are especially passionate about, and we launched our Deep Tech for Good initiative last year with the aim to accelerate the development and use of frontier technologies to improve the human condition and drive sustainable development across different markets. Today's discussion on the role of science and technology in shaping Singapore's green future is very, very timely and is a very important topic for us all to be talking about, especially since it is an issue that is becoming very important for many businesses' long-term strategy for growth and resilience. Businesses are under tremendous pressure to transform the way they operate. And just like the need to digitalize, they can no longer afford to ignore the sustainability imperative. Just this week, the EU, the world's largest carbon market, announced plans to expand and impose stricter limits on emitters as they look to becoming the first climate neutral continent by 2050. Besides policy shifts, such sentiments are echoed by investors around the globe. Funds guided by ESG principles, those that invest in companies that use green energy or tackle social inequality, receives a whopping $51 billion from investors in 2020 alone, more than double the amount in 2019. So these changes aren't just affecting the big industry players. SMEs and startups are also feeling that pressure, and they face obstacles as their corporate customers transform their supply chains and operations to bring their environmental impact in line with these regulations. So we see that a lot of these changes are putting a lot of pressure on some of these companies, and setting sustainability targets and having a clear plan to achieve them will soon be a matter of survival for many companies. But with many of the challenges as we faced before, creativity, perseverance, and a collaborative spirit will see technological solutions emerge from the frontiers of scientific research and technological innovation to bring us closer to achieving these ambitious targets. I'm very excited to be talking about and moderating today's session with our very esteemed panel of industry experts. As you join this session, I would like to encourage you to tap on the expertise of our panelists and pose questions that you might have in our Q&A box, and we will certainly get to them during the session. Use this time too to connect with fellow participants via the chat box. So let's get started. I'd like to ask each of the panelists to please give a short 1-minute introduction about yourselves. First, I'd like to call on Esther An, a very familiar face and strong sustainability advocate, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of City Developments Limited.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having me, and happy Friday. So I think I have been a Chief Sustainability Officer for CDL since 2014, but actually my journey started in 1995 when I first joined CDL with zero property experience. And but with that fresh perspective, we managed to really build the whole sustainability portfolio from ground zero to where we are today, and it becomes a global mainstream agenda. I'd love to share more, and I think just finish with one quote that we shape our building, thereafter they shape us. This is the wisdom of Winston Churchill. So it's a mixture of science and people that shape our built environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Tuang Liang, who is the Chief Science and Technology Officer of the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment. He's also the Group Chief CTO of the Science and Tech Policy and Planning Office. Tuang Liang? You're on mute, Tuang Liang.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm, as Suki has introduced, the CSTO in MSE, fairly newly minted in a fairly newly renamed ministry as well. With the new name of the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, it's really the emphasis by the government on the whole aspect of making sure that our nation will be able to sustain itself and be able to reach our sustainable goals. Yeah, a very quick summary of what I do. Essentially, I work with the three agencies, the PUB, NEA, and SFA, which is the Public Utilities Board, the National Environment Agency, and the Singapore Food Agency, integrating the science and technology development, spearheading the R&D directions, at the same time also facilitating the innovation and enterprise of many of our technology developments, so that we are able to transfer these capabilities into various business segments to provide additional fuel in terms of building up our green economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tuang Liang. We'll have a lot to be talking about later on with all the emphasis on the green plan in Singapore, and I think that will give a nice perspective. Nirupa Chandra, who is the Managing Director of Hitachi ABB Power Grids, has joined us as well. Nirupa, please.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thank you for making the time to hear us today. So I'm Nirupa. I'm the Country Managing Director for Hitachi ABB Power Grids. And if some of you have seen the announcement, we will soon be called Hitachi Energy from October. So we're all about powering good for a sustainable energy future with our technologies. And we've been in Singapore since the late 1960s and have continued to invest and serve major pillars of the economy like the electrical transmission and distribution, water industry, now more recently data centers. And everything we've been doing is with the aim of creating social, economic, but more importantly, environmental value. So I'm very excited to share today with you, our thoughts and what we're doing in the space of sustainability, but also how electricity, we believe, will be the backbone of the energy system in the future, and how much investment is required to help achieve the sustainability goal. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Nirupa. And Andre Stotz, who is the CEO of EcoWorth Tech, and he's also the Managing Director of Budding Innovations.
Hello, everyone, and I'm very happy to be on this panel. So yeah, my name is Andre. I'm the Managing Director of Business Builder firm Budding Innovations, and also the CEO of local clean tech startup EcoWorth Tech. And I'm originally from Germany, but I have been in Singapore for about 12 years. Originally, I came with a big corporate, and about 5 or 6 years ago, I've decided together with my current co-founder to leave the corporate world, to leverage on my skill set of bringing innovation to life, and to even make a bigger impact to humans' life, humans' environment, and humans' health. And I'm looking forward to contribute to the Green Plan and, of course, to this panel as well.
Well, thank you. So to kick off, let's talk about the Green Plan. We've got very ambitious targets over the next 10 years. And where we're looking to strengthen, the Green Plan is looking to strengthen Singapore's commitments under the United Nations 2030 SDG and Paris Agreement to position Singapore to achieve our long-term net zero emissions aspiration. So I'd like to ask, this question is open to everyone on the panel. In your current roles, if you could give us an idea of how you and your organization are bringing Singapore closer to achieving some of the Green Plan 2030 goals. I would like to start with Chuang Liang, because you being part of MSG, you kind of create the policy, but also, you play an integral part in the implementation to achieve these goals from that has been set out with the Green Plan.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. Yeah, maybe I'll just spend a couple of, maybe a minute or so, just quickly, just talking about the Green Plan for the benefit of the participants of this webinar. I think the Singapore Green Plan is really a plan with a target in 2030, which brings together the ambitions and policy goals of 5 ministries. The Ministry of Sustainability and Environment, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of National Development, Trade and Industry, and of course, the Ministry of Transport as well. And with the Green Plan, it centers around 5 main pillars. The first being a city in nature, where we want to be able to be a lot more ambitious, where Singapore started off being a garden city, then we became a city in a garden, and now we want to grow even more trees, right? So really essentially a city in nature. The other second pillar is about sustainable living, where we are able to operate within the very tight and small ecosystem that is Singapore in managing many of our natural resources in terms of water, in terms of waste, in a way that really allows us to continue to sustain a very tight, in some ways, very circular system within Singapore. The third pillar is that our energy reset, really looking at how, even though we are already using one of the cleanest fossil fuels today with natural gas, we want to go beyond that, looking at ways in which we are able to use and utilize renewable energies such as solar, and recognizing that our solar potential in Singapore is limited because of limited area. We've got a lot of high-rise buildings and of course a lot of cloud cover. That the other ways of actually implementing renewable energies through renewable imports and so on and so forth. And of course, the other aspects of the energy reset is really thinking about how we are able to implement green buildings, at the same time having a lot more renewable capabilities in order to basically drive our transportation system. The fifth pillar is about the green economy, recognizing that the green movement is not just a burden. It's not a burden that's put upon us, but really an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for Singapore to be able to reposition itself, to be able to be a leader, not just in policy thinking, but also to enable our economy to be able to go green, and not just go green, but hopefully sell green as well. And ultimately, the fifth pillar is about a resilient future in which we want to be able to understand the changes, unfortunately, that climate change is going to bring upon us in terms of weather, in terms of sea level rises, in terms of increased temperatures or even extreme weather events, and how we as a country is able to adapt, not just physically from our coastal adaptation and coastal protection programs, but even in the areas such as food, where increasingly we see that it could be a climate challenge. How then, as a small country that today imports 95% of our food from all over the world, how are we able to then increase our resilience in terms of food security as a nation? So I think that hopefully that gives everybody a fair idea of what the Singapore Green Plan is about. In particular for the MSE, we delve in areas such as water management, by PUB. And PUB started off just looking at basically ensuring that we have a freshwater supply for drinking and for the industry's use. But over time, its role certainly expanded to flood management as challenges emerged as we grew our city. And now in its new role, it is also responsible for looking at the coastal adaptation of Singapore. And some of the work that it's beginning to do is to be able to understand the impact of sea level rise and exploring the various areas innovation that we would have to implement in order to be able to provide some level of coastal protection. The other agency is NEA, which is National Environment Agency, and they essentially work at addressing some of our waste-related areas. But apart from that, they're also looking at the environmental aspects of air, mitigating air pollution, and of course, marine pollution as well. And some of the areas that we are looking at from there is really striving towards the zero waste nation. We have gone many steps to be able to move our waste essentially from the mainland to now. Actually, we put all our waste in basically an overseas landfill. In other words, we have a piece of an island in which we are able to first incinerate all our waste as much as we can, and to be able to bring all the residual ash as well as some of the non-incinerable waste to the island for us to be able to then provide the opportunities for the mainland to maximize its potential in terms of development. So a lot of the work that they are doing is really about trying to reduce, first even reduce the overall waste, and also reduce the amount of waste that's going to our landfill in overall. And to do that, they're working very, very hard with industry players to look at greater levels of circularity and also waste to resource. So we don't really need to burn or incinerate most of the waste, but there may be areas in which you can turn waste into some level of resource and opportunity as well.
Lovely, Chuang Liang. I think it's a big role that you have, having all the different agencies together. But with the Green Plan, Singapore's Green Plan 2030, maybe I'll jump to Nirupa. It's very timely too, because Hitachi recently announced your Sustainability 2030 plan. Can you share with us a little bit about what this plan is and how that helps our own Singapore Green Plan?
Absolutely, yes. Thanks, Ziggy, for this question. So we launched our 2030 sustainability strategy a couple of months ago, and it's all centered around 4 key pillars of planet, people, peace, and partnerships. And when you focus on planet, I mean, we've set clear targets for our own business operations to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% by 2030, reduce our waste consumption by 50%, reduce our freshwater usage, reduce hazardous substances. At the same time, we have also continued to invest in the technologies that we supply and make them more sustainable. So one example was we launched our new portfolio called Econic, in which typically in high voltage switchgear, SF6 is used as an insulation gas, which is carbon dense, and now it is being replaced with gases that are reduce the total carbon emissions by half over its lifetime. So such innovation will also further support the sustainability drive of our customers as well. And then focusing a little bit more on the people aspects of planet and people. On the people side, we are fully committed to keeping our people safe. And that's been part of we work with electricity, it's a dangerous game, but keeping our people safe is a key part of our priority. And the second thing is, which is more linked to sustainability, is the fact that, to achieve the goals that we need for a better, safe energy and climate future is to have the right people and the right innovation mindset, which will come with diversity. So we've committed to a diversity action plan with clear targets to also improve gender diversity in our organization. So these are some of the measures that we're taking as part of the 2030 plan. But bringing back to the Singapore Green Plan, so obviously it links very closely to our heart with our own sustainability targets, but most importantly, it links to the markets that we operate in. So Singapore, again, with its Green Plan, has demonstrated a strong commitment to lead the way for the rest of the world as well. Despite the challenges that Chuang Liang shared about, being short on resources, even if you put solar on every single rooftop, we would still only be able to generate 8 gigawatts of, and with curtailment issues around, intermittency, I don't want to get into the technicals with solar, then, we still won't be able to really get to the level of having the right level of renewable generation mix that the country needs. But then Singapore is now looking at other ways. Electricity imports, for example, is another area that is being evaluated. How can we get renewable energy from other parts of the world into Singapore? So new innovations certainly are the way in Singapore, and we're very excited to be part of this, change that Singapore is going to go through.
Thank you very much, Nirupa. And likewise, CDL too has got, you've pledged net zero operational carbon by 2030. Esther, you are a big figure within the sustainability agenda. And can you share with us your experience and what CDL is doing in getting to this net zero operational carbon by 2030 and how that links up to the Singapore Green Plan?
Yes, I mean, we all heard about that. We are actually in this decade of urgent action, and we fully believe that climate risks are actually business and investment risk. And this is reaffirmed by the World Economic Forum. You know, every year they have an annual global risk survey, and this year, number one is actually infectious disease. No surprise because of COVID. And among the top 10, 5 are all climate related. Whether it is extreme weather, whether it is loss of biodiversity, human impact on the, on the environment and all sorts of things. So we are very convinced that climate risks are actually business risks. And we were very glad that we started our journey, in 1995. At that time, of course, nobody talked about sustainability or, global warming, And what we did is in the construction sector, we know that we have actually quite significant impact on the environment, on people. People spend 90% of, indoor. So whether you are in the real estate sector, you have something to do with, you own a home, you live in one, you work in, buildings, and then you entertain in one, and then you stay in a hotel even when you travel. So how we design, build, and manage, and how you as user use building has a huge impact on the environment. And even up to today, building and construction activities account for about 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So that is also why we feel that we are in the position to drive change. We can tap onto technology solutions. So of course, we can summarize the whole so-called value creation business model. Otherwise, I can spend one whole day to talk about 26 years of journey. So what we did is actually, we look at 4 pillars of our sustainability strategy. The 4I, which is actually integration, innovation, and investment, and last but not least, impact. ESG can't be effective if you don't integrate it into your whole, corporate structure, from the board to the management to even down to your operation workers and all that. Then risks are there, but mitigation are given. Now we are talking about adaptation. Without solutions and all that, how are we going to achieve net zero? I have no clue, okay? So innovation is the only way that we have to change the way we live, work, and play, and run our business. Yeah, so we need to find solutions and work with people like, the Hitachi, Andre with startup and all that to meet the very ambitious green plan that Tuan set for businesses like us. So in 2017, we actually issued our sustainability blueprint. That was actually aligned with the Paris Agreement. We called it Future Value 2030 because we are private sector. We have to make sure that there is a strong business case. We have to survive. If not, we can't, ensure our stakeholders are taken care of. So the 3 deliverables, to cut it short, the 3 deliverables are actually the 3D. The decarbonisation is key because of our high carbon impact and energy impact. Then the second one is digitalization and innovation. Without AI, without big data, without monitoring, without solutions, there's no way we can work towards a low carbon future. And last but not least is to measure impact, we must track, manage. What gets measured gets managed, and we must disclose, because nowadays you have heard that investors are asking for information. Everyone is asking for data, and then even court can really, punish company. I'm sure you all have read about it. The court can order companies that, hey, you guys are not doing good enough. Please set better target. BlackRock, the world's largest asset managers that control almost, trillions of dollars, they make it very clear that investee companies like us, listed company, we must present a strategy, not just climate strategy. This year, he made it very clear, net zero strategy. So if you are not, you will risk being divested, your share will be dumped, and they will not invest in you. So there is a strong business case in sustainability. Okay, I better stop here first.
Thank you, Esther. You've brought up so many points in there. You know, I want to kind of go in and talk a little bit about innovation. You talked about innovation, the need for innovation in your strategy. And, you know, you talked about the role of startups and partnerships. So maybe it's a good segue for me to kind of ask Andre. So from a startup perspective, you know, we have a lot of these conversations with corporates, right? When it comes to innovation, many corporates want to innovate, right? They're on this journey of innovation. And inevitably on this journey, I think startups play a big role because startups are very quick, right? Very nimble, and the speed to be able to adapt and to apply is very quick. So, but I want to get from your perspective, from a startup perspective, how has it been, you know, in terms of the appetite for these new technologies in the green sustainability space with the ongoing challenges? And what are the challenges that you face working with corporates?
Yeah, thanks. So from my perspective, I think the global pandemic has caused a lot of damage and hardship, right? And everybody realized that the way of life almost came to halt, right? So with that also, it has created a kind of a mindset to create a better and a healthier world. So sustainability and climate change are definitely critical kind of points to be seen now when the world recovers from COVID. And so see clients it as well as investors. Now, however, when investors are now looking at new investments, and probably through the pandemic, they also have been impacted and they've lost their part of their investment portfolio. To provide new investments now is something that has become a bit more tough, right? And also investors are not just looking in one area, especially if it's a deep tech or science-based startup, but to look at a wide range and decide, is that investment beneficial for a few areas? And a lot of startups like EcoWaveTech, who is in the same situation, needs now to deliver, let's say, even on the triple bottom line, right? Which means that just providing a sustainable benefit is not good enough. It also needs to be an impact to society. And also, of course, it needs to impact and be profitable. And I think that is now an increased new challenge, not new challenge, but an increased challenge that the startups have to meet. Then, of course, when startups work with corporates, corporates tend to be very hierarchically complex due to their matrix organizations. They have a complex decision making, which requires a lot of synergies, a lot of alignments, and a lot of corporates. People work on multiple projects in parallel, right? So getting the right priorities from them, and also while being not as agile as a let's say startup is operating, I think that's some of the challenges as well. Plus, of course, if a startup works with a corporate tends to require an innovation solutions or a readiness level to be at a bit more mature stage. And that is where the startup has to overcome the hurdles to bring the proposition or the solutions for the corporate, whether it's a product or a service, to the right stage. And then innovation can happen. And especially sustainable innovations is now something that has become more important, as I mentioned.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that we've seen, I mean, certainly in our work with startups, you know, that collaboration, that desire is there, but the actual journey or the implementation may be a little bit more challenging. We're getting great questions from the floor, and thank you for that. So please keep your questions coming in. I think what I'll do is, if the panelists don't mind, I'll go straight into addressing some of these questions. So the first one from Feline. For MNCs like CDA and Hitachi, to the ladies on our panel, how do you cascade your sustainability plans to your whole supply chain? And how do you monitor and track their emissions? Do you want to start, Nirupa?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, really good question. But I think the world is really just getting started in terms of being able to track emissions and green credits transparently. There are efforts in several countries now, Singapore, for example, with the renewable energy certificates market. So this is what we're also now starting to track with our suppliers. So, but the first thing is to start whether our organization, our supply chain organizations have sustainability development targets and sustainable plans. We are still, I suppose, as an industry, not just as an organization, in the early days of finding mechanisms to track transparently on emission targets. And I think Esther would agree there.
Actually, yeah, we are all surrounded by the so-called hot soup of acronym. Okay, in our early day, we started with actually CDP, which is the Carbon Disclosure Project. I started in 2002. And that was actually the world's largest NGO that tracked carbon impact of listed company worldwide. It started with very small, but today they are almost tracking 9,800 companies, and together they control assets of about $100 trillion. So visit CDP, they have very, very stringent measurement, and they also have an annual, publication of all the listed, all the companies that they track. But some companies opt not to make it publicly available. But for ours, we have already made it publicly available since 2008 already until now. And they are also the guys behind, the scientists behind actually the so-called SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, which is a huge, very challenging tracking system that is actually globally endorsed by Paris Agreement, by World Resource Institute, by CDP and all. So that is really like, you don't wake up one day, you want to say, I want to go net zero, I want to reduce my target, just plug the number, like a 4D number. You need to base on science. What number you want to reduce is really based on backed by science and also your past track record and your prudent projection. That's what the exercise we went through when we get our SBTI carbon reduction target accepted by SBTI, which is a very, very challenging effort that we have done. Over 8 months, we actually managed to do it. And why they make it so challenging and ambitious is to make company really sit up. If you want to achieve this target, you have to drive change. You have to adopt a different business model, solutions, innovation. So this is the most stringent one. And of course, the latest, we are actually pledged to support World Green Building Council, which is actually our sector. Not every sector will go for that, but ours is very, we want the criteria to be very clear. So we adopt the World GBC Advancing Net Zero criteria. And it is all on the website. So very clear criteria. And if I go back to your question about supply chain, how they can actually engage our supplier, very simple. SBTI report require you to not just report scope 1 or 2. We also, not just from the grid and what you generate, but you also have to look at embodied carbon, which actually very much to do with the supply chain materials and all that. So for now, they're actually working towards it. You have to set target for your embodied carbon reduction target. And how do you do it? We actually have engaged our supply chain. We have already conducted, supply chain risk segmentation, and then also teach them what Scope 3 is all about. And we are going to engage them to go green together. My target is your share target. So this is, it's all about numbers. And you can't just wake up one day, yeah, I want to save the world, but I don't know how to save, or I don't know how to track. So that's why reporting, tracking is so important. Yeah.
And I think also, if like a huge organization like CDL is kind of pushing the buttons, right, and setting these targets and also demanding that of your supply chain, then the change will happen. Because sometimes it's lip service, right? For many years, we saw that ESG was really a tick in the box, right, in terms of reporting. But now when we see that investors are also demanding that, right, that changes behavior, right? That compels organizations to really put priority and focus in that area. This other question from Andre. Do you find that Singapore is investing sufficiently in new technologies that can help develop a low carbon future? I'm going to stop there. I'm going to ask Tuang Liang to answer this. For your role as the CTO, right, of MSE, right, science and tech, as you know, has both Esther has talked a lot about, the use of science and tech to be able to drive the tracking, the technology, right, to drive innovation. How, from the government's perspective or from MSE's perspective, perspective in your role, do you think we're investing enough? I mean, Singapore is probably one of the, you know, in terms, we're known for the amount of money that we invest in R&D and in science and tech, but maybe give your perspective, Chuang Liang. Are we investing enough?
Thank you. You know, if I could have my way, we're never investing enough, right? Because I think the challenge of sustainability is huge, is tremendous. And I think that the whole world is responding by actually putting the kind of resources that they as much as they can to be able to address this. In terms of our resources, clearly in terms of research budget, we are limited as a small country. And beyond just money, even talent, the number of scientists, engineers, all the people who need to develop new technologies, that is not an endless supply given a small island. And I think that the key thing for us in terms of strategy is first to have a very clear set of goals in which what the Singapore Green Plan is about, to be able to then sharpen the research and technology such that even with the limited resources, we are very clear on where we are directing those. And at the same time, very importantly, engaging the partners. The government will not be able to achieve all of this by itself. Most importantly, the industries, right, whether it's corporates all the way to startups, are a very, very vibrant community that we need to be able to engage to be able to move this forward as a nation and really as an entire planet. And of course, not forgetting that there's also the people element in which we are trying to also get that movement going within Singapore, and hence we've set up avenues such as the Singapore Eco Fund, which is $50 million worth in providing grants, providing the assistance for very, very ground-up initiatives in which the community can take action in terms of driving sustainability on their own. Because it's very important to recognize that the Singapore government does not have a monopoly of ideas. In fact, the best ideas often come from the ground. And I think that's why we acknowledge that we want to be able to embrace the community, embrace industry to be able to really make good our sustainability ambitions.
Thank you, Chuang Liang. And you're right, you know, the whole partnership, you know, we can't do it alone, right? And the ability to partner from across the ecosystem, startups, corporates, academia, from the research, that whole spectrum is going to be needed to be activated to be able to achieve these very aggressive targets. And let's talk a little bit about the innovation side of it. Andre, can you share with us what are some of the other innovations from the wider startup ecosystem that you've seen that you think potentially could bring us closer to achieving these aggressive targets that have been set out?
Yeah, so there's a couple of innovation that I've seen in the wider ecosystem. And I mean, especially here in Singapore, there's a lot of startups that tackle really serious issues, whether it's on mitigating the risk from climate change, like mitigating the impact from climate change, at least in the short term, that is inevitable. There's startups around that. There's a couple of startups around resource management. That means, for example, reducing waste or turning waste into value-added product, whether that is food waste, via insects into, let's say, proteins, whether that is reusing other food waste and upcycling that. Then I think a couple of startups around fermentation, where, for example, through algae, proteins can be created, or other nutrients that are non-animal based, and other carbon sequestering or capturing technology. So I think Singapore does have quite a range of interesting startups.
Yeah, and it's not just Singapore, right? I think sometimes when we are looking for solutions, it could be from other markets as well, where we can be sharing that knowledge and also being able to bring in some of those solutions. But certainly there's a lot of great work that comes out from our universities, from the research, and how that can be commercialized to be able to address some of the issues and problems that we're talking about. There are a couple of questions from the audience with regards to cost. And I guess it's that balance, right? To innovate, and how do you balance that from that cost perspective? How do you balance the costs and implementing these green technologies? So perhaps I would like to ask that from the corporate perspective, I guess, you know, from Esther and Nurula, in terms your view. How do you balance out the cost versus application?
Well, okay, for green building, everybody knows that technology don't come cheap and don't come free. So, but to us, we don't call it cost, we call it investment, because I mean, we have done it for almost 20 over years already. And every year, because of our energy efficient fittings and practices, it helps us save about $4 million a year in terms of utility bills. And we are very committed to innovation, not just, like you said, partnership is important because it's not our core business, but we see it as a very important priority. And interestingly, we started our annual materiality study since 2014, which every year we ask our internal and external stakeholders, including investors, media, policymakers, and our customers and all, to rank the ESG issues. From 2017 onwards, the top issue has been innovation. So it just shows that, investors are taking long-term view. And when we first started the green building journey, it was very difficult. Everybody is saying, wow, additional costs and all that. For commercial property, it's easier because we can get back the so-called some ROI and savings. For residential, it's really how you manage the cost and, so what we are looking at is actually long-term partnership as well. Like, for example, we set up the NUS CDL Smart Green Home and the Tropical Technology Home since 2017. So what we are tapping on is a win-win partnership. Okay, we can, contribute in terms of some financial support, but we can tap onto the bright brains, and all the professors, researchers, and all that in from the university. So that is a very good partnership. And then we have actually come up with quite a few successful pilots that we are still working on. And just now, Andre was mentioning one point. I just want to, chime in that a lot of businesses go for the mature, startup. But what we are looking at it is not just the mature startup. In fact, I set up an incubator for SDG. Actually, some of your colleagues, SGInnovate has visited it. It's a very, humble but centrally located space at Republic Plaza. So what we did is we provide free office space for startups from 1 to 3 years old, not when they are totally very successful. They don't need us to give them the rent-free space. And not just rent-free space, but also mentorship and network, and to help them to pitch to get accelerator and investor into their business. So what we feel is corporates need not to be just writing check. What we can do is a lot more. So we also have like a paint, which is called Gush Paint, which is created by a group of local young startup a few years back. And we even, not just their consumer, not just pilot for them, we are also investing some funds in them. So there are so many ways to help startups, not just like a one size fit all, yeah. And in addition, we also invest in some VC, joint forces together, and to support some innovation, not just in Singapore, but in US, the fifth wall. Yeah.
Thank you. Nirupa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, certainly. I think from a cost perspective, we're living in very good times now with cost of solar and wind, so renewable resources becoming more attractive than fossil fuel. So definitely costs have come down. Today you can put rooftop on your solar, solar on your rooftop and get cheaper electricity than your retailer. So that's definitely good news from a cost perspective. And as a technology company, we continue to invest in bringing costs down, because what we want to do is ensure that we get more deployment. So the next decade is definitely about massive deployment of clean energy solutions across the network. And I'm very hopeful for continuing to work on, improving the cost curves. You can see that with the electrical vehicle industry, with battery technology, similar trends to what we've seen in the solar and wind space.
Thank you. There's a very interesting question here. Tuang Liang, you're in a bit of a hot seat because you are you are part of MSE, the policy level. There's a question from Feline again. How do you monitor, track, and verify what the businesses claim they decarbonize? So, yeah.
Thanks, Feline, for that question. I think that it's a very important question. And as Esther's highlighted, right? Whatever you can't measure, you can't manage, right? To be frank, I think that in terms of the global landscape, in terms of measuring, there's still a very fragmented field. There are various methods in which one needs to measure, and it's also difficult at this point in time to measure because the global system or supply chains are just not as transparent. So you just can't pick up a product like what you do in the supermarket. You pick up a can and it's got all the nutritional information there. You can't have, unfortunately, a carbon rating or a sustainability grade that is common to everything that helps a consumer or a business decide what is the green product versus something that's less green. Now, I think that's the challenge, and hence, then I think that Feline has asked a very, very good question. And what we, I think, collectively are doing, both within the technical community, as far as scientists are concerned, as well as the policy groups in looking at how to be able to harmonize these measurements, is still a work in progress, to be frank. But I think that rest assured that we all recognize that eventually we will need to have some form of a more harmonized conversation, ability to be able to have that same conversation using the same language in order for us to be able to make the most informed choice. So unfortunately, it's still a work in progress, but it's certainly something that we are all aware of and working towards.
Well, can I ask, Esther, you touched a little bit about this, right? About the tracking and the measuring with your suppliers. Because there's another question here about how do you ensure your suppliers or convince them to go down this green path with you? Can you share a little bit from the CDL experience, what you've done there? You're on mute. You're on mute, Esther.
We started in early 2000. We were very fierce, actually. We don't have the mandate to impose law on them, but we just put it as like, hey, if you want to be invited to tender for our project, you will have to meet our EHS policies and subject to audit and an assessment. We call it a 5-star EHS award. So we put all our active contractors and suppliers together. Regularly, we do an audit, every three months, or 6 months, depending on how active the projects are. And we do it openly. So all like 10 or 12 contractors all sit down together, present their EHS policy, that is environmental, health, and safety. So you know each other, under peers influence or peers pressure, you will want to do better. And that is how we actually provide some carrot and stick. And the best performers will be, will walk away with an award and also some reward as well. And of course, they will stand better chance for us, to invite them back to tender for our project. So that is how bigger company can do to get their smaller supplier, not to bully them. Really, we want to bring them together. You can't save the world alone. Okay, if you don't get your whole ecosystem in place, we as developer are like the project leader. I can tell you my vision and all that. In the end of the day, the main contractors and the subcontractors have to deliver the project. And how do they do it? We need to deploy a systems to manage. We can give them policy, but if your policy you don't track, it will just collect dust in the drawer. So that's why we have all this very stringent policy. And initially, of course, they were complaining, oh, wow, why so difficult to work on your project and all that. But after a few years, they all are actually, most of them is almost 100% ISO 14001 certified. And they also see the benefits. Less downtime, less accident is good for everyone. Good for the environment, good for productivity and people. So now almost 20 years passed already, and they know the rules when they, bid for our project. And in fact, we actually bring the whole industry up in a way, because all these contractors don't serve us alone. They serve the whole, all the other developers also. Yeah. So that's how we actually engage supplier. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Esther, absolutely right. So I think it's very important to remain persistent and consistent with demanding this of the entire supply chain. We've done this before when it came to health and safety regulations. We're starting this now with sustainability. But just back to Tuan Nang's point that there isn't yet like a global standard, like a green mark for companies that are sustainable. So I think that's I suppose, work to do for all of us in the industry.
Thank you. So we heard from the two giants on the panel. If I can get that perspective from a smaller organization like, Andre, with your startups, what is that kind of challenge that you face, with regards, because cost is a much bigger, I mean, let's face it, right? Startups have that bigger issue with cost, isn't it? So how do you balance that out?
I mean, what's important for us is to find what the client is looking for, and how we can work with partners to resource effectively deliver solutions to the problem, right? And we try to always leverage, as a startup, we always try to leverage on the wider ecosystem of trying to involve partners that can help us on the journey, either with developing technical solutions or with helping us access to markets and clients. But then definitely from a startup perspective, there's many more ways to tap into all types of funding. So that could be grants that is being provided either from government or from the corporate side. That is other startup events. That could be all kinds of in-kind contributions from the different partners, right? But most importantly is to find what is the value add that the client wants, what is the win-win with the partners to move forward, and then how to convince those that can help with the funding on giving them a return in the longer term. And I think we've seen a couple of successes, of course, one in our own startup, but then also with Budding Innovations, where we have been working with across a range of corporates, SMEs, and startups, government, to really come up with science-based innovation and deliver solutions that impact positively human life, health, and environment. So there are chances there, besides just the cash funding.
Yeah, well, always exciting in the startup world. We face a lot of challenges, but I think, the ability to move very quickly and to adjust and adapt is certainly there, the speed to change. There's this one question that actually, Tuan Ngang, is for you. Let's talk a little bit, because we're running out of time, but food. There's this talk around, okay, like the whole 30 by 30 plan, we import 90% of our food. This issue around food waste, how do we tackle that food waste, plastic waste with COVID and packaging and lockdowns and, takeout? Tuan Liang, from your perspective, what are we doing from the policy, from the government side to address this?
Thanks for the question. I think that for food waste, one of the things that we've started to do is actually put in basically policies and regulations, right, to be able to get establishments to separate their waste streams, and that is critically important, right? Because in handling waste, when we mix all the waste together, the separation between different kinds of waste, between dry and wet waste, creates a tremendous amount of effort and more often than not, energy to be able to do the separation, and sometimes you can't even do that. So right now, we actually have set up committees in looking at the circular economy, of which one of the work streams is directly to address food waste. Different kinds of food waste. I think that we started looking at food waste from food processing plants, right? And some of the food waste that could be revalorized, if you like, rather than dumped. Say, for example, soybean, and being able to revalorize soybean waste into other ways, or you could actually put them and feed them to black soldier fly larvae, which subsequently can be reconverted into different kinds of protein and so on and so forth. The other work stream that we're looking at is, you're right, looking at plastics. And one of the things that NEA is looking at is about working with partners to look at how to then turn plastics to not just recycling into another plastic resin, but also potentially using it into a new fuel or a new oil, if you like, right, through pyrolysis. And with that, we'll be able to really capture the caloric content of plastics rather than incinerate them, which essentially the eventual byproduct is more carbon into the air. But the more we are able to look at technologies first to be able to collect more effectively, to separate them, and then to treat them is one of the key things. And I'm sure from a community perspective, you would have seen the reverse vending machines all over the island. And I think that is one of the first ways in which we are looking at to be able to encourage and grow the public awareness to the need to be able to recycle some of plastic bottles, and that it is achievable from a habit perspective. And we are hoping that through that, it triggers them to do more than just recycling that bottle, to be able to recycle everything that they can within the household.
Can I chime in from the corporate perspective? Two exciting, initiatives to work with a young startup. This startup is called 7 Clean Seas. Some of you probably may know them. And we are working on doing a plastic neutral certification. This is the world's first. So from a building, we are actually starting the audit, process already. So you have a lot of ISO certification, carbon neutral certification, and all that. So we are starting in Singapore here, the world's first plastic neutral building. So this is point one, working with young startup, 7 Clean Seas. The other one is just now, actually, Andre mentioned that there are many ideas of like how to turn waste into valuable resources. We have come across a lot. But there is one particular one we are seeing some light in the tunnel, really encouraging, is turning plastic waste into sand. And in the building sector, sand, concrete are the #1 building materials. If we can push this boundary and really can turn plastic waste into building material, it's going to be game changing. And we are working together with scientists on that. And Tuan Liang, we'll share some of, we'll tap onto your brains as well. And we're working with some university and poly professors and all, and working towards proof of concept. It's challenging, but everything starts with a dream. You don't dream, nothing will happen.
Hey, and that sounds like, Tuan Liang, that's so, I can see that potential. It'll solve your landfill issue. It will, help with the circular economy to be able to rejuvenate and reuse, recycle waste. I think that's fantastic, so
yeah,
I think,
And that's a double thumbs up from me.
we need everyone to come together.
Absolutely. The power of everyone coming together from across the ecosystem to be able to tackle these issues that the world is facing, right? And the potential and the opportunities that startups have, right, in being able to deliver some of these solutions. And I always, I attended once a session where Al Gore, obviously, he was talking a lot about climate and environment. And he also said that we are living in an age where there's so much technology that's available to be able to help us to address these existential threats that we're facing, right? And that's why it's important for us to have these type of conversations, to see how we can work together as a whole world, as a whole ecosystem to really drive this change and to take those solutions to market to be able to create that kind of impact. We are running out of time, but I do have one very last question that I would like to ask every one of the panelists to also give me your wrap up. Yeah. This question from Zingling was, is what is painfully missing in the Singapore ecosystem that is needed to move us closer to meet the long-term goals? I would couple that question with, for each of the panelists to please, when we address that question, also to give your viewpoint on what every single one of us as individuals can do. Very often we're always asking, what can the government do? What can corporates do? What can you do? What can they do? But what about us? Because I always believe that we are the masters of our own destiny, and every single effort really helps in a big concerted push. So I would ask, as a round off to this session, to please give me your perspective. Esther, can I start with you, please?
Okay, we are living in a fast-changing world. I mean, I'm a parent, with, grown-up children already. Whenever we come together, they will always complain, wow, my children have told me not to use so much energy and not to buy plastic bottle and all that. I still believe that when at the beginning, when I say consumers, the young consumers are going to be the driving force. And especially in ASEAN, we have a very young population. Every time when I go to some international talk, I always fly the ASEAN flag. More than 60% 60% are are below 35 years old. Can you imagine this force for change? You know, they are the future leader, they are the investor, they are the consumers. So never say never, and change or be changed. That's all.
Thank you. Powerful. Andre, may I get your thoughts, please?
From my point of view, I think the power lies in the collaboration and really trying to create an impact. So a lot of times sustainability initiatives stop at an PR event, or that's where the resources are mostly focused. I think it's up to us on saying what kind of impact we want to create, not only create the vision, but then partner with those that can support, make that impact, and then bring meaningful innovation and improvements to life. So
thank you, Andre. Nirupa?
So for the next decade, it's all going to be about action. I think we've set up the plans, we've set up the KPIs. So the next decade has to focus on action on two fronts. Firstly, investments, a continued investment in clean energy and other technologies for a sustainable future. And secondly, driving behavioral change. And that's something we can do at an individual level in the choices we make in our day-to-day lives. Selecting, whether we buy green electrons to run our household or our organization, or, whether we buy less plastic in our lives. So those are choices, small choices that each of us can make in our lives. So action would be the word.
Thank you, Nirupa. Tuan Yang.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to add to what Andre said in terms of what is the existing gap. Actually, there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of people, a lot of companies already trying to act, right? And that gap is actually the gap of the interconnections between these entities. There is a gap that if we are able to connect even more effectively, I think we can amplify the level of collaboration to be able to really magnify the ideas and the co-creation. Because we see that from a fragmented approach, I don't think we're able to achieve much, but only when we have united action, we'll be able to then do that, to be able to really go far. And that's why I think that the gaps there, we just basically need to look at linking some of the ideas, linking the people, linking the communities, and drive action. And related to really linking to what Nirupa has said, I think that, at a personal level, my takeaway related to what we've seen in this pandemic experience is that we can change.
Yeah.
And we can change fast, right? We have the will and we have the capability to change fast, both at the individual level, the company level, and even at the level of governments, all right? And with that ability to change and a recognition that we can do it, we also have proof that we can innovate. We can innovate because our scientists were able to develop vaccines in double quick time in a way that was never imagined, but when the situation presented itself, we could do it. I think businesses were able to adapt, with the rise of e-commerce, basic businesses basically leapfrogged into the digital age, right? Of course, there were people still lagging behind, but you do see that shift in the whole corporate sector in looking at how they can actually change. And so really, I just want to leave that message that we can do it, not just as individuals, not just as single companies, but I think collectively, we should have the confidence that we can go far in this sustainable journey, and we should act as soon as we can. We should act now. In fact, we should act yesterday. But I think that I'm hopeful and confident that we'll be able to do this well.
Well, thank you. It was extremely inspiring closing remarks from every single one of you. So I think the single message is action. Do your part. Collectively, we are very, very powerful. And I think that, it is possible. It's just a matter of, as Nike says it, just do it. And with that, I would like to end the session, and I would like to thank my wonderful panelists for having such a great discussion, and to the attendees for all the wonderful questions that came in. I do apologize, we did not have the time to go through every single one of them, but thank you for the very lively, engaging session. And I encourage every one of you to connect with each other and to please tune in to our YouTube when this session is going to be posted up soon. And with that, thank you and have a great evening. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
bye.